For more on the story, we're joined by PRASA whistleblower Martha Ngoye, who testified about alleged graft at the state capture inquiry, and this particularly related to PRASA. Martha, good evening to you. Thanks for your time tonight.
Good evening, Kathy, and thanks for having me.
Well, last week we heard you speak with a very pained heart when the country, of course, was commemorating the killing of Babita Deokaran, and you spoke about the fact that there's been very little will to bring those behind the capture of several state institutions before the court. I know that you weren't at Transnet but at PRASA, but do these arrests give you any form of hope at all?
Kathy, thanks for the question. In fact, they do give me a sense of hope, and a sense of hope that I hope will be lived and realized.
What has been the most difficult part of having effectively being worked out of PRASA for having raised questions and concerned about what you had picked up as irregular contracts, and still today to not really having some of those who were behind that work actually being brought to account in a court of law?
It's been extremely frustrating, Kathy, and it has been heartbreaking at the same time, because it is clear that those that are in power and those that have connections will always go scot-free. I mean, I've had my name tainted. I can't even apply for a job, because the minute I apply for a job and I have to speak to the issues I'm going through, then I'm not a suitable candidate. But all I was doing my job. So for me, those that have connections, at least where I am, have remained untouched, even though the evidence is huge that is available and that has been made available to the Hawks.
You've been suspended for a number of years now, and you're talking about just the difficulty it has been to try and get back into the workplace. Why do you think that is? What do you think is at the heart of this problem?
You know, Kathy, and I don't know, and I can't explain it, because both the private and the public sector have treated us, those that have come forward, doing country duty, as lepers. We've got targets on our backs, and it's not going away. It is unexplainable. I mean, I'm not the only one. I mean, those that have got jobs, I guess, are very lucky. But a lot of us sit outside with the skills that we have because people just don't want to touch us. We are yet to find out the reasons. I mean, and they won't come out and say it.
You are a skilled professional, very capable, and certainly by virtue of the position you held at PRASA, somebody that should have no difficulty really getting a job. When you think about, the difficulty you've had, how are you getting by? Because it's been a number of years now.
It has been a number of years, Kathy. I've got to keep myself sane. The one thing that I've started to do, Kathy, is work with civil society, because I've realized that civil society has been available and they're there to take this fight against corruption with us. And that has given me the strength to continue, because without that, I don't think, one would be able to really gather the energy that one has had. And move on. I know quite a number of whistleblowers that are really traumatized and find themselves not being able to do anything because they're traumatized in the injustices that have been leveled against them. There are a lot of us. Some of us are lucky, and I think maybe because I'm a legal person, I understand the issues and I understand how it works, that I'm able to gather that strength and move on. But those that don't even understand the processes that they are being taken through, they have really suffered. And I'm very grateful, to having made connections with civil society, because I don't think I would have lasted without them. Yeah.
The difficulty becomes the fact that despite what you had raised when you were at PRASA, The corruption continues. I think in the last month, we heard the Minister of Transport talking about how prevalent corruption remains at PRASA to date.
Yeah. I mean, just yesterday, Kathy, there was a newspaper article in the Sunday Times that speaks to how a 7 billion rands tender was botched or was not done properly. These things are still there. They continue. We get to know about them. There's been quite a number of stories that have been written, about PRASA. We read about them in the newspapers, and we're not surprised.
Ultimately, what this tells us is that there isn't enough will to root it out, because PRASA is one of those entities that, if you look at investigations, Public Protector, State Capture Commission of Inquiry, even its own internal inquiries have spoken about corruption, and yet it continues. So there's a suggestion that says nobody wants actually corruption at PRASA to end.
Kathy, I think it's important to state that it's indicative of what happens when a board works with law enforcement agencies. If you look at what happened at Transnet, the Martha Molefe board came in, and now we are sitting where we are because they were willing to work with law enforcement agencies. If you recall, at the time when he was the chairperson of the PRASA board, when law enforcement agencies were not doing their work, he took them to court. You can imagine how that was so unnecessary and what that meant as far as the organization is concerned. I've worked with the Hawks. I've given as much evidence as I possibly can and information as I possibly can in the circumstances. But is the will there? I don't know, Kathy. I don't think so, because the information is available. We get told that investigations are 95% done. What 95% means, I don't know. So we'll see it when it happens. But the reality is, where there's no will, clearly we do understand that things are just not going to happen. Here we have it. The issues of Transnet come after PRASA's issues. And we see arrests. So it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah. Martha Ngoye, thank you for your time tonight. And of course, you heard her there describing herself as one of the whistleblowers, but having given extensive evidence about some of the irregular contracts that were taking place at PRASA, which she had tried to stop and ultimately ended up being worked out of the organization.